Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Today is Monday, April 11th. I'm choosing to start early instead of late once again. Um, in the accountability section, oddly, I have done everything right over the weekend. I started playing Ni no Kuni. Now, the very first recording I played Ni no Kuni, it kind of crashed, and I think maybe I even unplugged something, unplugged my old monitor, and I'm replacing it with a new monitor. This would be my oldest, smallest third monitor, which was blinking, and this new replacement that I've been playing with over the weekend doesn't seem like it has that same bottom half of the screen blinking. That really is an indicator of something really wrong with it. Um, so maybe that was the problem with my computer in major parts, is that I just had a bad monitor that was straight up sending weird signals back to my video card, causing hard lockups and crashes. Otherwise, I've played multiple episodes. Like, I really jumped from having not even started Ni no Kuni remastered. Whether it really matters if it's remastered or not, it's probably a mute question, because the remastered seems very similar to the original version of the game and not much of a remaster. Uh, there definitely is a problem with Ni no Kuni's audio, that it just abruptly stops when it wants to play a jingle because you've accomplished a goal. And you think in a remastered version they would have fixed that at the very least. But otherwise, the game's fine. I have much more complaints about Ni no Kuni being oddly too Japanese in some places, kind of, uh, and not Japanese enough in a lot of places also, for something that had Studio Ghibli's involvement. I don't think Studio Ghibli was really that involved in the game. I think they did a small handful of flat 2D animations that you see early on in the game, but by the time you're about at the 8th hour into the game, which is where I am, you start to recognize that you're going to get very little flat 2D animations. In fact, you're going to get very little even voiced cutscenes, which is weird because I was sworn Ni no Kuni was supposed to be targeting kids and trying to be kind of like a Pokemon game. Although, in fairness, Pokemon games mostly are not voiced also. Uh, but the words are too big. Your mascot character is constantly talking in his own kind of jargonized dialogue that makes it more difficult to understand what he's saying. They use some like really big $5 words. The themes are fine. I mean, it's still kind of Pokemon. The gameplay would be fine, other than the fact that you get into dungeons and the hallways are so narrow you're forced into fights. And you probably don't even need to fight as much as I'm playing it on easy mode. It doesn't seem like you really need to fight that often and grind up. Um, yeah. Overall, it looks like it's going to be a fine game, and I've spent the whole weekend playing it. I also set up an app to log me in every noon, and we'll see if that causes any trouble if we're still logged in here and streaming by noon on my phone. So it's just gonna launch Yu-Gi-Oh! every day at noon to do the daily logins and the dual lives, which is why I don't have any dual lives to watch right now, and that's just gonna be my attempt, certainly, to get to this or get done with this a little bit faster. Alright, this will start at noon, so we should just focus. We could pick what we were going to play, I guess, and we could potentially pick what deck I'm going to play in case I'm already done with streaming before noon happens, which is a slight possibility. So yeah, fingers crossed there won't be any more problems with my computer. And there won't be any more crashes generally on games, or any more than is normal. It's not super crazy for a game to crash once every 30 to 60 hours. No more RAM messing up, no more corruption of OS files, or messed up writes. I'm trying to weave a narrative in my mind that is actually believable, that there was an initial problem with the RAM just getting old and breaking because it said it could handle XMP profiles when it really couldn't. And then that led me to installing, in an attempt to fix that, a beta version of a new BIOS, which was installed in a corrupted fashion, again possibly because of the RAM. And then that has caused some weird disk writes to the SSD and NVMe through the motherboard, which was causing the corruption of the files. At the same time, my monitor, my third monitor, was breaking and causing problems, and that could very well have been because I yanked the cord to it and short-circuited something there, or it could just be that my old Vizio monitor was pretty old anyways and heavily used. Right, so this is going to let you declare level. A lot of speed droids. You know what? Honestly, I just don't think I can. Like, I could definitely talk about Harpy's Feather Duster since I understand that card in Monster Reborn. But a lot of these other cards, it's just going to take too much reading. And since I am playing a Japanese RPG and already doing a little bit of reading more than I would like, I don't think I have the energy within me to actually do the planning. And that kind of sucks, and it does get to a point that I think needs to be made. I am not playing collectible card games right. I just am not. Part of playing a collectible card game is supposed to be the planning and the preparation and spending that extra time looking at cards and reading their effects and being really interested in that. And I've kind of lost any interest in doing that many years ago, probably back when I was playing Hearthstone. There's a lot of cards that you would have to learn to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Certainly right now, and as soon as they start adding any new cards, which I don't think the latest expansion actually added any new cards, really. I think it just picked a different selection of cards that already existed to offer to you. But once we get a true expansion where there are new cards, at that point, I definitely should read the new cards. But it's just a little exhausting. And sure, the single player story content is supposed to kind of help you there by explaining general groups of cards and general concepts like XYZ monsters or synchro summoning, things like that. There's still just so much. There are just so many cards. It's overwhelming. Some of these cards that I'm seeing in this deck are pretty old cards. I definitely think that they are trying to take something like Junk Synchron here, which oddly is a super rare card. This is a fairly old card. I think the idea is that they wanted to make more cards that would synergize around that, so they probably added things like Junk Converter, which is probably a much newer card, and the idea of Synchron cards being their own thing. which, yeah, that's kind of a cool idea, certainly. Let's just hop into some regular gameplay for the moment, though, instead of just talking. I said on Friday's stream that I was gonna try and do a Lego set, and I didn't get around to it, but kind of in a good way. I am in a weird position where, of my secondary distraction projects, I'm not making a lot of progress. I didn't make any progress this weekend because instead I focused on my main project of trying to be a YouTuber and be successful at that, which is much better. So, no, I didn't get back to playing on the Nintendo Switch. No Pokemon Snap or new Super Mario Bros. U. I also have Mario Galaxy, but I kind of think I'll sit on Mario Galaxy until I finish at least new Super Mario Bros. U or Pokemon Snap. It'll be lucky if I have enough free time to even do one Nintendo Switch game a month. But yeah, I have a whole bunch of other projects, certainly, still have bookcases to assemble and build, and I'm waiting on the LED lighting to arrive on Wednesday. But that doesn't really stop me from building another bookcase in the meantime. I also, I suppose, managed not to watch that much TV over the weekend, so it was a highly productive weekend, relatively speaking. And that's great. I certainly don't need to lose momentum on Ni no Kuni. It has a lot of dialogue, and it breaks up the cutscenes and the dialogues and the in-the-city time in a very different way from the outside-of-the-city times, or in the dungeon times. So you're not really experiencing the kind of amalgamated experience that I really would have liked to see. It took it 6-7 hours to tutorialize the whole game up until this point, and there's still some features I'm sure that they haven't unlocked. I almost wish, now I kind of do wish, that if you're going to make a RPG game, a JRPG game, they should have a pool of enemies, and then they should randomize that pool that you'll run into as far as random encounters, and you would just fight that enemy once from that pool, and then you'd have to exhaust the entire pool before you see him again. Unfortunately, you really can't do that in most scenarios because you just don't have enough video RAM and shaders to load in all the textures of all the enemies in the entire game, and you want to kind of localize the grass type creatures in a grassy land. You don't want them showing up in an ocean biome. Looking at the numbers on Ni no Kuni, there easily could be 300 to 400 different creatures that you're going to potentially run into, but I'm not sure if you're going to really end up being able to collect them all, or if that's just going to be something you would have to kind of bend over backwards to try to accomplish. There is this long-running history, certainly around RPG games, since it's such a long-running genre, where the sales points would be, we have 50 more characters, we have 100 more characters, even with like Pokemon, like the original 150, and then they brought in another 50, and then another 50, and another 50, and now there's probably somewhere around 800 Pokemon characters. It's not realistic numbers. Honestly, if a player is actually going to try and collect them all, nor is it really realistic numbers as far as how many fights are actually in any individual Pokemon game. But It's just that the numbers and the feature creep has to go up higher and higher and higher so that it just becomes a sales point to highlight. Whereas as a more adult gamer, I would kind of prefer to see them basically abridge those numbers. If you could give me a Pokemon game with a decent 100 Pokemon and get rid of a lot of the garbage Pokemon, I would be probably fairly happy with that. Does this card... Oh. This card does make it as a zombie though. So if I had killed this first, then replaced, used the spell, yeah, I might have actually won there. Well, I suppose as far as other good news, I did manage to finally clear my clogged up ears. I don't even know if I mentioned that, but yeah. Seems like whenever the allergens get high, my ears love to clog up, and it was really painful and really bad in my left ear, and now it's back to mostly normal. Maybe I'll make a special effort to put some more drops in and just try and keep any new buildups prevent any new buildup from happening. I really should just stick some earwax drops in my ears every couple of weeks. I think a lot of people have the more runny, waxy buildup as far as mucus, and they don't know the absolute nightmare that hard, waxy buildup can be for earwax. Of course, it's gross to talk about too. Man, there definitely is a sound effect. I keep hearing it. Makes me think I'm hearing somebody knock on my door. Let me just double check to make sure somebody isn't actually knocking on my door. I'll just be right back. Okay, I'm back. Nope, it wasn't anybody knocking on the door. That's certainly the other problem too, is that when you make that large jump from barely hearing anything, because both ears were kind of clogged, to back to being able to hear a lot, you can easily be misled, particularly in the sound effects of games, particularly in this game. Normally, my hearing, I think, is probably a little too good. There definitely are probably some frequencies I can't hear anymore as I get older, but I tend to be able to hear really through walls, far away, neighbors 2 blocks down, slamming doors, things like that. Maybe not 2 blocks down, but 2 houses down. Let's see. Let's pick a level 11 card. Maybe I was supposed to pick something more realistic. Yeah, I guess I should have picked a 4 there. He's already got something on the field. There is, I suppose, something a little weird to be said around the kind of idea of playing Ni no Kuni, in that it is a lot like Dragon Quest. It is a fantasy world, fantasy game. It's kind of surprising that you can jump from the real world to this fantasy world. I don't think they actually even tell you what the name of the fantasy world is, oddly. But the fact that you can just kind of jump back and forth between the 2 worlds willy-nilly, and even though the story really is going to directly tell you when to do it, is a little weird, because normally you would expect it would be more of a isekai, another world type experience, where you would just be reincarnated or trapped in that other world permanently. The main character you play as, Oliver, is a really young kid that is kind of stupid, so he's often having to be told directly what to do by the mascot character Drippy, who talks in an odd dialect and is more difficult to understand. The game often feels like it's too complicated for little kids compared to something like Pokemon, but also feels too kid-friendly for anybody who wants to play a JRPG. It would make a lot more sense that adults, fans of JRPGs, would want to play something that's at least up to the level of a teenager, like Final Fantasy 13 or so. Like, those games aren't insanely mature, but they're way more mature than Pokemon-like games. And I could see people potentially having an affinity for, like, Studio Ghibli and being tricked into thinking, oh, well, this is going to be exactly like Spirited Away, or actually I think it's probably the closest to be compared to something like the one with the witch. I've forgotten the name of it. I just said the name a couple hours ago. But yeah, there's a Ghibli movie with a witch who has a long pointy hat and a dress and a broom, and she Kiki's Delivery Service is the name of it. That's the name, yeah. That I would say Ni no Kuni is closest to something like that, but personally, I would show Kiki's Delivery Service to a 10-year-old. I wouldn't expect people with nostalgia for that to want to put in potentially 60 hours to 100 plus hours in a JRPG that feels something like that. And I kind of know the story is already kind of off the rails, because I know that in Ni no Kuni 2, they straight up introduce a guy with a gun, which just does not feel like that makes any sense at all. That universe would be a universe with guns. Yeah, I imagine as the days go on and I continue to play Ni no Kuni, I'll have less to say about it, as I'll just have to drudge through things. There is a pretty poor system when you die. There's not a lot of checkpointing that you would expect a kid's game would have. So when you die, you potentially can lose a lot of gold. And while it doesn't seem like you do too much with gold, you definitely can buy treats to level up specific stats of your Pokemon-like characters. So the best tip I can say is to rush through dialogue that's uninteresting, and spend all your gold when you're in the city on treats and other things. And be extremely careful in boss battles and regular battles. It's really the regular battles that'll kill you, because in the process of losing a regular battle, you will go back to usually the beginning of a dungeon and lose almost all your gold, if not all your gold, and there will be no save point anywhere nearby. I could bring this guy out for 800, but it wouldn't do anything for us. The only thing that would win here is if this works, then this works. We bring not the big ritual monster, but the small one, that I could then summon the small one and kill this one and this one without him synergizing or doing anything else. And that's probably sounded like a whole bunch of gibberish, so let's just see what happens. Okay. Yeah, and I guess for the accountability section I don't have much else to say, other than I do think I've fixed my programming on my macro as far as making the news, the Gamatsu news articles appear correctly. It was a simple mistake in which I was just not referencing a specific link. I was looking at the first link always. So it was creating a scenario where the test to see if it had hit the point where it had already seen an article link would never have returned a negative, and ended the loop, because it was just always looking at the same thing. So the first link might say something like apples, for an example, and it might be looking for banana, and link 2 may be banana, but it was just going through a loop and saying, well, first link says apples, that doesn't match, let's do it again. First link says apples, that doesn't match, let's do it again. It was doing that over and over again, and the reason why that wasn't creating an infinite loop is because I was not testing only if it said banana, I was also testing to see if it had tried multiple times. So there was a counter of about 50 tests, and then when it hit that maximum 50 test, it just gave up at that point. And that's what was happening. I said in the Friday recording that yes, that probably would only take me 5 minutes to fix, and it did. So I was not wrong. Of course, in programming, it's the times that you are wrong that are the nightmare scenarios, where you think something's going to be easy and then all of a sudden it turns out not to be easy. Because I started somewhat early today, there's not going to be a ton of news, which is fine. Like, we can leave that for Wednesday. At some point I also need to upload videos, and I think after this stream would be the perfect time. I need to continuously upload videos after every live stream. Like, there is still a small possibility that any hard drive might fail just one day and the footage would be lost. And that could be a lot of footage that could be lost, because I tend to not upload things fast enough. Video Games Chronicles has a hands-on for Nintendo Switch Sports. I watched a Giant Bomb quick look of this, although it honestly was just them talking over recorded footage, even though they weren't really admitting that's what was doing, and they weren't actually playing the game, which I don't feel like recorded footage of an experience you had inside of Nintendo playing against Nintendo employees. I don't think that's really the spirit of what a quick look used to be. I mean, why does it matter at this point? Giant Bomb is nothing but a pale shadow of its former self, but it's kind of pathetic. Regardless, it looks like, for the most part, Nintendo Switch Sports is a decent game. There is some weirdness, I would say, in that a lot of the sports you do are not really heavily relying on a new generation of motion technology or highlighting the abilities of the Joy-Cons compared to a Wii nunchuck. If anything, Nintendo Switch Sports coming out so late in the life of the Switch really just highlights how they failed to make Joy-Cons the next big thing, and that certainly is reflected also with like 1-2 Switch as being a game that was supposed to highlight what games could possibly do. The problem is you just don't have parity with those gameplay mechanics on the Xbox or the PC or the PlayStation, so only first-party titles made from Nintendo that are exclusive would ever engage in using any of those controls. And the Joy-Cons really don't even have parity with like mobile games. Tilt controls, you could potentially have tilt controls in parity for everything except for PC, and even PC you could plug in like a PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 controller and get potentially tilt controls if they release the driver. I'm not sure they even did release a driver for tilt controls on the PlayStation controller. But the main problem with Nintendo Switch Sports, I don't know why this is all to the edge here, I don't know if that's my fault or if that's their fault, I would say, is that the vast majority of the time you are not moving the character around. So there are a few different ways you play soccer/football, not American football, soccer, but most of them you are just kind of timing based, pressing a button, swinging a Joy-Con. You're not actually moving the character. With the Wii bowling, yes, you do move where you're going to bowl, but you're not directly actually moving the character so much, or it doesn't quite focus or feel like that. With badminton and volleyball and tennis, all of those, the characters just move automatically. Which really gives you kind of a fairly limited language and simplistic language as far as what motions you're going to do to actually accomplish things, and just really time based. Same I think is true for this Chambara with stick fighting game. Now, in all fairness, Wii Sports, we kind of completely forget about there being Wii Sports Resort, which I believe was the name of the sequel to Wii Sports. It's fairly easy to forget that Wii Sports had anything other than bowling in it in the first place. These are definitely gimmick games trying to appeal to people who very possibly just have no interest in playing video games or no experience in playing video games, and the number of people like that is increasingly small. They really should have brought out Wii Bowling at least on day one of the launch of the Switch, and it was a huge mistake to miss out on that. The other sports are nice too, but I imagine a lot of the focus will be around Wii Bowling. I know if you keep playing, you get some customizations of the characters, and you can play with Miis otherwise, but that is probably about as far as it's going to go. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a 100-pin secret bowling mode that you can unlock somehow, or some other silly modes you can unlock. They want to get some form of golf, probably real world golf, added in an update later, but I'm not expecting much there otherwise. It definitely feels like a game that should sell for at most $40 that they're probably going to ask $60 for. Moving on, the Braid, Carto, and Ethereal developers have established a new studio called Furniture and Mattress. The debut game is in the works and will support from the Astra Fund. This is a Gematsu article. There is, I think, something to be pointed out here, that it is David Hellman, Nick Sudner, and Nicholas Rekabarin. Hellman was the artist on Braid, not Jonathan Blow, who honestly I don't think would ever make a video game again. I think he's directly said he would never make a video game again, and honestly I don't think could work with other people in a group setting. Sutner also previously worked for Sony Interactive Entertainment and Sunhead Games, where he was the lead writer on Carto. Nicholas Rekabarin was one of the two developers behind Ethereal. So, yeah. It's three kind of side developers making their own business. So it's frankly setting them up to fail to call them the Braid, Carto, and Ethereal developers, even though I don't even know what Carto and Ethereal are. But to even mention Braid in the name, even though it's accurate, is setting themselves up to fail. Because that is almost certainly not going to be the type of game or the level of quality to expect. If anything, you look at this art, you look at this name, Furniture and Mattress Company, I'm expecting a mid-tier indie point-and-click adventure game at best. I'm not expecting a breakout out hit indie game like Braid that gets overhyped like crazy and gets an entire movie talking about it. Well, indie game, the movie talked about 3 games, but Braid was definitely one of them. Also, Sony seems to be setting itself up for either a friendly or hostile takeover of Epic Games, or vice versa. Maybe just a actual on equal terms merger, as much as there can be an equal terms merger. Sony has made a $1 billion investment into Epic Games to deepen the relationship in the metaverse field. The metaverse being thrown out again. The Fortnite maker is valued at $31.5 billion following the latest funding round. Sony SEI's valuation probably is closer to $100 billion alone. Plus Sony, I would be weird certainly although I have speculated that would actually happen. It would be a little weird if the parent company of Sony decided to cut loose Sony Interactive Entertainment and the PlayStation brand and all of that. It might make them a little bit more money though, if the idea is that the Sony movie and other departments could license Sony properties and movies to other consoles more. But I don't think that's really a big hindrance even now. Also, KBI is apparently, first I've heard of this, a holding and investment company behind the Lego Group, and they have also invested $1 billion in Epic in the latest funding round. Why does Epic need the money? That's a good question certainly to ask. Is Epic just building funding to fund its lawsuit against Apple, which Sony definitely would benefit in a lawsuit against Apple? I'm not sure if Lego inherently benefits in a lawsuit against Apple, because Lego, last I heard, was trying to kind of work with Apple. But I could see Lego having recently announced working with another company instead of TT Games. This might just be the more steps towards the idea of TT game or Lego games showing up in different places. And if the Lego Group wanted to make a successful kid-friendly game, working with and being on good terms with the creators of Fortnite makes a lot of sense. Even if it just gets you an occasional Fortnite crossover where all the people in Fortnite start to become minifigs. I guess that is probably an indication that Epic, because of Fortnite and because of the Epic engine, Unreal Engine, still is on its way up and succeeding, where certainly that could stop being the case if Epic loses its lawsuit with Apple and Fortnite loses its fandom. We really will just have to see. You can see Epic has put out a statement here, but the way this looks is particularly small text. Yep. It was the Epic Games that Lego Group had already announced that they were going to team up to build a place for kids to play in the metaverse. So it does definitely feel like Lego seems to think that they will be the people who own the kid space as it was in Metaverse, if Metaverse actually happens, which I think that's the biggest if there, certainly. This is probably not too much worth even showing, since it's going to be blurred out, but RetroArch put out, they occasionally put out these videos showing how RetroArch works as far as specific games and specific emulations, and here they are trying to show what Windows 3.1 being emulated with a DOSBox core would kind of feel like and look like, and yeah, it certainly is quite the blast from the past. It shows them using Windows 3.1. Is there really any reason why you would use Windows 3.1 if you're not trying to emulate some old Windows 3.1 exclusive game? I don't know why. Like, I couldn't see a real reason why you would want to do that. There are lightweight versions of Linux that will have newer modern security features and hardware features available compared to Windows 3.1, and better scaling and resolution for modern monitors. And even if you were going to try and play an old DOS game, for the most part, almost all of them worked on Windows 95, because Windows 95 was still running on DOS in the same way as Windows 3.1 was running on DOS. It's not until you get to Windows XP that you don't have the issue of DOS being the underlying operating system and Windows just being a graphical user interface on top of an operating system. Whereas in modern times, Windows 10, Windows 11, 100% the Windows is the operating system. There is no really underlying disk operating system underneath it. That's all just called Windows. There might be some kind of safe mode command line only, but that's not really the same thing. I did watch a video on Mirror's Edge Catalyst, just to watch someone else's criticism of Mirror's Edge Catalyst, and of course I would have a confirmation bias to feel like I was justified and right, but I definitely felt like as watching this video from another YouTuber, another just random YouTuber, everything I had to say about Mirror's Edge Catalyst was exactly the same thing the other YouTuber was saying. Although, oddly, he did at the end come to a very different opinion. I was very much of the opinion that I would recommend nobody play Mirror's Edge Catalyst. He was saying, even though it was shallow and vapid and not that good of a game, that you still should play it. Which on a certain level, I could probably just chalk that up to successful, good YouTubers always ride the line and try to end on positivity, and me being an actual critic and a bit of a negative Nancy will tell you straight when he doesn't like a game. In fact, I'll sound like I don't like a game even when I mostly did enjoy a game, because I'm not here specifically to sing the praises of games. I will when it needs to be pointed out every now and then, but it's usually very easy to see the good parts of a game. It's the negatives that people are wanting to hear, or at least that's the negatives that I can find. Anyways, moving on. It probably doesn't say that much, but THQ Nordic retweeted this first 4 figurines Twitter feed, and they're selling these kind of exclusive, look like they're pretty expensive. I wouldn't be surprised if this is $300-400 statues of the characters from Darksiders. This one is Death, but I think they may have one for each of the 3 characters that have been shown. Have we seen all 4 characters? I guess we have seen all 4 characters. We just haven't seen the 4th game. What that mostly boils down to is it is a small shot in the arm as far as confidence that a Darksiders 4 will get made. There's no telling what kind of game it will even be, but hopefully they can just kind of wrap up that story, because it's been a long time certainly, and it would kind of suck to leave it hanging. So yeah, if they could just wrap up the story and maybe start another series. Would say though that the artistic idea of having 4 different games that were of 4 different styles probably ruins Darksiders as a concept, and so it would make a lot more sense to soft reboot it after the 4th game and have it be like the 1st game, in the 1st game only. And try to put out more Darksiders games on a more frequent basis. That is one of the things about Embracer Group that has been a little odd, certainly, in that they've acquired a lot of companies and they haven't put out a lot of product. I feel like maybe you could look towards Embracer Group's actions and see it as almost a future echo of the actions of Microsoft and potentially even Sony in the next few months, where Microsoft has acquired a lot of companies recently too, very possibly to following the patterns of Embracer Group. So it would be ideal to see THQ set the pace once again now and actually have games come out and the games actually be good. Yeah. I don't think too many people thought Embracer Group as a company was going to set off a land war, as it were, a land race for acquiring companies. But they have kind of done that eventually. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says the Xbox Spring Sale is now live, featuring savings of up to 80%. I feel like we'd already covered that one, but that probably means everything else is new. Halo Infinite Season 2 Lone Wolves has been dated and has a new trailer. It's coming out May 3rd, 2022. The Guardian of the Galaxy dev says it's finding its audience after a slow start. A lot of these, I think, were Komatsu articles on Friday, and it just took Video Games Chronicles that long to catch up. Honestly, I think Video Games Chronicles, or Video Games Chronicle, being more of a European company, I think they do straight up go to Komatsu and just copy their articles. And there's no great way to kind of filter between that, other than my own brain. Let's see, the Sonic 2 movie has reportedly topped the original's US opening. The sequel is said to be on course to make as much as $65 million in the US. Is millions even worth talking about, though? If a good, successful video game sells 100,000 to 300,000 copies, for easy math, let's just say a successful game is one that sells 100 million copies. Or maybe I'm thinking 100,000 copies. 100 million copies at $60 would be $6 billion in gross revenue, which is just a factor of 10 or a couple scales of factor of 100 more than $65 million for a single movie. Plus, the investment in making a game doesn't have to be as expensive as the investment in making a movie does, although sometimes I think games probably do cost more. Yeah, if we start to really think about the apples to apples comparisons as far as dollars, a Sony Pictures would have to make maybe 10 or 20 very successful movies in a year to even match the sales in one successful video game. Which, that's not going to be the only factors that kill movies. Eventually movies will be a very niche thing that it will only make some sense to see a movie versus seeing an interactive experience. But it certainly could kill a lot of movies. Like, a cheap, poorly thought out slasher Friday the 13th type movie probably is better if it's interactive. A Matrix style action movie probably works better as a video game if it's interactive. A deep thought provoking movie where it's just a bunch of talking heads probably doesn't work that well as a video game. A romance game versus a romance movie, romance movies probably would still make some sense there. That being said, when's the last time there's been any kind of rom-com or just romance movie at all released? More and more movies have pigeonholed themselves, trying to get more and more sales with fewer and fewer ticket buyers out there. So the movie industry, if it is where it will succeed, is when it starts to differentiate itself and say there is something here you can get that you can't get in a video game, because it's going to be, we're going to make more niche movies, more artistic movies, and we're not just going to make something that has to have first person military shooting in it to make sense. Braid arguably is kind of a example of a story that very well would have made more sense as a movie instead of a video game. If you'd taken some of the action sequences of something like Tenet and put in some of the drama and mystery around something like what is that movie, American Psycho maybe, or Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. There's a couple movies definitely that have covered on similar themes to Braid. Almost certainly Braid was even influenced by some of that. Moving back to news, Video Games Chronicle says users are reporting their digital PlayStation classics are, quote, expiring among players. Some players claim they're unable to boot PC classics such as Chrono Cross. I wouldn't be surprised if this is specifically a factor where the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation Vita have certificates that are dated in a specific way, and the certificates were only set for 10 years, 20 years. Actually, for internet certificates now, there's a big push to make it mandatory that certificates only last like 6 weeks to 6 months. They want certificates to expire very quickly to stop people from making fake certificates that will last forever or indefinitely. So my first thought there is that if you took your PlayStation 3 and Vita and set it back 10 years, your games might very well, if you can change the clock on it and set it back 10 years, you may very well find that it would once again become playable. assuming there aren't some other reasons why that doesn't work. Inherently, this doesn't matter because this is just another example of a lack of support and the idea of digital games lasting forever just not being true. And I think this is just another example that justifies hacking a PlayStation 3 or PS Vita and just putting whatever ROMs you want to put on it. The new Chrono Cross remaster, for instance, which is pretty bad from everybody that I've heard talk about it. DF Retro talked about it also. Apparently some of the background and art was just straight up lost by Square Enix as far as the new Chrono Cross remaster, and they had to just rebuild it, which I think once again just points out laziness on their behalf, because if they were having to make new things from scratch, then they should have just pulled the trigger and made a whole new game, a full remake, instead of a remaster. Let's see if this can work and save the day. It probably can't. It does, I suppose, still make for an easy decision, though, if they make bad remasters of games like Chrono Cross. This article goes on to say Sony Interactive Entertainment has yet to comment on the report. Kotaku suggests it could be related to the Unix epoch, which the engineers set arbitrary dates designated at the beginning of an operating system's lifespan. I don't think the Unix epoch is an arbitrary date by an operating system's lifespan so much as it was a agreed upon date around the lifespan of the Unix, and I don't think it's probably something as complicated as the time in the PS3 and the PS4 being a like 32-bit instead of a 64-bit integer starting at the Unix epoch as the first point in time. That could be it, certainly. It could be that the number is just too big, but I imagine it's probably just expiring certificates. But yeah, one of the side projects I haven't even started to think about actually doing will be to actually turn my PS3 on for the first time probably in 10 years, see if it still works, and just try to make it a little bit more valuable of a device. Put some old emulators on it, put RetroArch on it, make it play some sort of games, see if it's still somewhat viable to play Blu-rays and DVDs, or if I need to buy a new Blu-ray player if I want to watch actual Blu-rays and DVDs. It's really hard to commit to that, though. Streaming really does kill the extra enthusiasm you might have to pull a DVD off a shelf and put it in a player. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle continues. Konami is saying that it's taking criticism to eFootball very seriously ahead of the big update. The troubled Pro Evolution Soccer successor will receive a major update next week. Well, I suppose we should just wait until they come out with that major update and see if anything anything is improved or not, or if enough is improved or not. Particularly as somebody who doesn't particularly care about soccer, it's very easy to be a sideline sitter on that one. Valve says it has over 2,000 games are now Steam Deck quote verified or quote playable. Not want to talk about the Steam Deck after the initial wave of influencers, I suppose, got their Steam Deck. I know, like, Linus Tech Tip said he was going to try to use the Steam Deck for several months as his only PC, and so 2 or 3 months from now we'll probably get a video from him around that, but there isn't this consistent push where every time there's a new game that comes out, people are saying, hey, is this Steam Deck playable? I don't even know of somebody like PewDiePie, where it would make kind of a lot of sense for PewDiePie, who's really more of a memer than a game streamer, to try any new game immediately on the Steam Deck and just make some slight comment there. Like, it's very possible that it's simply a case that right now, in the middle of the after effects of like the pandemic and just global uprising and war and all kinds of horrible things, they haven't been talking about Hong Kong very much lately, but apparently Hong Kong, every single citizen was forced into their house for what they said was going to be a 5-day quarantine. It's been over a week. It's impossible to get food. It literally looks like they could be actively trying to just starve to death the entire citizenry, or at least a large majority of citizens in Hong Kong, under the guise of like a 2-week isolation around COVID, which, yeah, saying it was only going to be for 5 days is not scientifically accurate. It would need to be at least 2 weeks, and they would have needed to have given supplies, water, food. Apparently they're just going to kill every single pet, every single dog, cat in Hong Kong. It also seems like that's the case. It's really easy to get away from all of this and forget about all those atrocities happening outside of Ukraine because of Ukraine and Russia. And Russia has definitely given China and Hong Kong a lot of cover. But yeah, in such a environment, back to video games, it's probably a little too flaunty to pull out your Steam Deck every single video, every single time you play a new game and say, hey, can you play this on the Steam Deck? Also, I doubt very many gamers are going to want to stream or even go through a few hours of gameplay on the Steam Deck, because streamers are going to want to have their streaming software and their setup and their getup and their webcams and all of that. I know there hasn't really been that many new games even since the Steam Deck came out, so it's not like there's even a game on the top of my head that would be really great on the Steam Deck that's new. Sure, I could think of Binding of Isaac Rebirth, probably would play very nicely on the Steam Deck. I can think of Rogue Legacy 2 when that comes out, being potentially the first game that might make a little bit of sense on the Steam Deck, but I don't know of anything else in between those. And it's not like Valve's putting out any games except for the slight Aperture Desk demo, which that was only about an hour long. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Sega says its super game plan is multiple games and it may use NFTs. It was previously believed that the code name referred to a single AAA title. If anything, having a code name called Super Game and then it referring to multiple games really highlights, I think, that Sega has no idea what Super Game is, and they are simply straight up lying to investors. Some of them could incorporate the cloud or NFTs. Like, yeah, they're just throwing out buzzwords to investors. Take a step back and remember where Sega was, what the big news around Sega was just a month or so ago. It was that Sega was closing all of its arcades and that it was losing money like crazy because of the pandemic, and it can't make money through the arcades. Outside of Sega owning arcades, maybe Sega makes a few electronic devices it sells in Asia, but nothing in the worldwide. And I don't think it owns much of anything else to talk about. Maybe it owns some kind of anime company, but probably not one of the biggest ones. So I think Sega for probably a decade has been resting on its laurels with its arcade income and not thinking it had to work too hard or succeed that well with video games. So they've tried a thing here, tried a thing there, but they haven't had enough successes to build a strong foundation of cash flow liquidity, I would guess. They do have the Sonic movie, so maybe they could just license out Sonic for more movies, but that would not probably give them enough money to maintain their type of business. Sega very possibly could be the first video game company that is a major failure amongst the pandemic and other issues. I wouldn't be surprised if Sega says, let's just lay off 50% of our workforce, 80% of our workforce. Let's shut down departments that make games. Let's shut down departments here and there. And let's just maintain a small sitting board of really rich upper management people that own the licenses to Sonic and own the license to games. And let's just license these games out to other companies that want to make games and not do anything in-house. Because let's face it, Sonic games built in-house have not been good in decades. I definitely could see Sega just shrinking down to being a holding company for Sonic and some other games. It would be hard otherwise for them to pull themselves out of their funk. What they really need to do is they needed to go through the Sega games and start to make full-on reboots of things like Golden Axe and even crazy things like Comic Zone and Sewer Shark, and not just the ones that were really popular. They need to start remaking everything that was unpopular, and Crazy Taxi, things like that. Crazy Taxi was popular, but they need to see whatever they have a license for and try to make a full-on reboot around it. Play on nostalgia. Bomberman. Like, even the most recent Bomberman game, though, was like Bomber Girls, and it was an arcade game first. It's very much not really leaning on nostalgia. Right. We may win here. Of course, it is also possible everything I said won't occur. It could be that this super game actually is a plan that they've been planning out and thought really through, And having multiple games makes a lot of sense because it's going to be something like a Pokemon where there's a red version and a green version. And maybe even NFTs will find some way into the hearts of gamers, although I question that. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Advanced Wars Remake is reportedly unlocked early for one player. Strategy game was recently delayed following preloads, but apparently somebody has figured a way into unlocking it, or it is randomly just unlocked. I probably poo-pooed the idea of Advanced Wars being delayed because of the Ukraine invasion, the invasion of Ukraine. But after hearing how it was a vaguely Russian country in tanks invading another country, or vice versa, that there did seem like there was fairly obvious direct similarities. Not that anybody would seriously like accidentally use footage from Advanced Wars in a CNN article or anything like that and portray that as like actual footage of the Ukraine war. But I could see them just not wanting to get that kind of bad press. Somebody somewhere would have tried to cancel Nintendo over that. Over some pedantic, ridiculous argument that Nintendo just made the game as a reaction to the invasion of Ukraine, which would be not accurate at all. Of course, Advanced Wars Remake has been in the works for years. Yep. I have suspect that these functional cookies and the cookie preferences are actually just Twitter changing its API, because like you can pretty well tell that this is them trying to show somebody else's tweet, and third-party cookies, which you'd probably need to access to see a embedded tweet, I think are just generically blocked. So, of course, if I just hide the notice, it makes the articles look mostly there, although you're not seeing the embedded content, which is probably fine. Moving on, Certain Affinity is hiring experienced Xbox developers following a Monster Hunter-like exclusive reports. Reports earlier this year suggested the project has been in development for some time. So, yeah. It's probably not an actual Monster Hunter game, but something like Monster Hunter. Since I have now gone down the path of playing Ni no Kuni and playing Fallout 3 before then, there is definitely an argument towards going deeper down that path and playing Monster Hunter, which is a Japanese RPG, but it is a definitely different kind of RPG. It's much more focused around hunting big individualized monsters instead of grinding on smaller characters. It's in a lot of ways, Monster Hunter is probably a lot closer to the way you fought monsters in The Witcher 3 compared to the way you would fight monsters in an average RPG, where you would just like be running into the same goblin 100 times over. Here we gotta surrender. We can work through all of this and work towards getting to level 100 on our battle pass, so we don't have to worry about that, which will almost certainly get to level 100 very early. And we're getting packs. I don't know if there's a real value. We're going to lean on this for a second. Let's see, how many of these do we have? 26? Yeah, I don't think there's a real value in just pulling these packs now. We should probably just wait till we have at least 100 of them and then come back. And at a certain level, well, there are nearly 4,000 cards here. You can see I do have a fairly large amount of these cards. I would say we're hitting somewhere around the 50% mark, if not even further. And a lot of these also are like 3 copies of ultra rares. It seems a little odd, but there might be other reasons for that. And if we're getting normal cards as rewards, at some point we probably will have the normal section of any card pack or card pulls always full. We're at nearly 3,500 if we claim everything. So probably leave us with just this one daily quest to do. Nope, we've got 2 more quests to do. I know playing solo mode is one of these though, so if I get particularly bored, I could also hop into some solo mode. Yep. So, declare an attack to a monster, inflict damage to your opponent. And that gets me up to 3,700. Should get as much done as possible as far as potentially going up ranks or just getting rewards for playing ranked now before the whole special event happens. And ideally I won't end up having to spend as much time in this festival as I did in the last festival, but I don't see a real reason why that would be the case. If anything, it's very believable it will take the same amount of time, if not longer. One of the problems now that I have this different TV is that this older TV that I'm using, which was just a spare I ended up having, does not really have a mount, and my Vizio was on an arm mount to be to the left of me. Now it is to the left of me, but I would say it's 90 degrees to the left of me, where the Vizio was closer to 45 degrees to the left of me. So I really have to turn my head to see it. Also, the color on it's pretty bad, but that doesn't really matter since I'm just using it to monitor chat and recording and all of that. So yeah, I'll probably have to end up just moving the table that the swing arm, monitor arm is attached to forward, so it's easier to see. Move it around a little bit. Not a big deal, just something I'll have to do. If anything, that might actually help, because it might mean I can potentially move the recliner chair in a slightly different position, and the microphone in a slightly different position. It definitely raises some possibilities, at least. Let's go ahead and special summon that. that. And begin the battle phase. Activate this. Do this. Do this. And then end the turn. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says Kingdom Hearts 4 is official and watched the debut trailer. Did Sora always look this Japanese? I feel like Sora probably did look this Japanese in the Japanese versions of Kingdom Hearts, and then they made him look more Western, just like rounder eyes, not as wild a haircut in the Western versions of the game. I thought Kingdom Hearts as a story was done. And definitely it should have been done. Like, I just don't see there being a good reason to once again go down that well. On the Disney aspects even, it's not like there's that many new Disney movies that you can include. Are you going to bring in the family from Enchanto? They very possibly might. Encanto is the name of it, not Enchanto. It looks like this might be set in the future, or the past. Who knows? The whole story of Kingdom Hearts is really too wild and crazy. Whatever is being shown here definitely doesn't even feel like it is a what Kingdom Hearts 4 is. This looks like a mobile game that, and I guess that's the problem, is that they're just too addicted to the idea of making more money on the Kingdom Hearts to give up on it. This is probably the teaser trailer for Kingdom Hearts 4. They probably announced multiple things. What's funny is at the beginning of Kingdom Hearts, you have Sora waking up on a kind of island, and now he's waking up in this like modern day city with cars, and he's just in Japan with Japanese people wandering around. Or actually, it doesn't even look like Japanese people. It looks like randomized looking Westerners in Japan. In a lot of ways, I feel like Kingdom Hearts went off the rails halfway through the tutorial of the first Kingdom Hearts, but this feels insanely off the rails as a trailer. What would be funny here is he reaches out his hand to summon a keyblade, and it doesn't. Nothing happens. Yeah, this is basically let's make Bayonetta in the Kingdom Hearts universe. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is a tease and the actual game is not set in a Japan-like environment. I wouldn't be surprised one bit if this is a dream and it doesn't actually play out like that. They're calling it Kingdom Hearts 4 instead of Kingdom Heart, as it always had in this. I kind of feel like, yeah, Disney is going to be more than happy to keep that license going. But it definitely seems insane. Definitely feels insane to want to go in this direction and do it again. Kingdom Heart is probably the reason. It's probably half of the reason, at least, why every other Square Enix game fails to make as money as they had hoped, as a claim, because they're probably doing some shady accounting and smuggling, laundering money directly into the pockets of Disney to keep the Kingdom Hearts series going. I wouldn't be surprised if every other Square Enix game's profits are being poured into Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts games. And Square Enix needs Kingdom Hearts as a series to maintain Final Fantasy as a series, where Final Fantasy really should take a break, and a good 5 years of no talk about a new Final Fantasy, with the exception of like Final Fantasy Online, would probably be great. And Disney doesn't really care, so they'll let it happen. But there definitely is a real question as to why would anybody want to play Kingdom Hearts 5? Like, I have certainly put a lot of time and a lot of thought to, could I cover the Kingdom Hearts series? Probably not. I'd probably get content ID'd from Square Enix or Disney, one or both. But even if I was guaranteed that there would be no content IDs, I cannot justify wanting to play the Kingdom Hearts series at this point. It's just too long. Kingdom Hearts 5 should be a soft, not a soft reboot. It should be a straight up hard reboot of the Kingdom Hearts series. It should be a new, younger Sora again. Sora now looks very much like an anime adult, where he was definitely more of an anime kid at the beginning of the first game. And yeah, there should just be new characters and moving forward. It would have made more sense probably also if the Square Enix characters, the Final Fantasy characters that showed up in Kingdom Hearts, were different characters each game, because there probably was a different Final Fantasy released in between each Kingdom Hearts game. And this also opens up a dangerous scenario. We already know they're doing some weirdness around realities and timelines as far as the Final Fantasy VII reboot. I believe it was the Final Fantasy VII reboot, not really being a reboot. What if they try to integrate the Kingdom Hearts universe into that too? What if all of a sudden Final Fantasy VII Part 2, whenever that comes out, directly only continues a story that then has to be answered in Kingdom Hearts 5 in some like shameless cross-promotion way? That could be a nightmare. I very much always try to encourage people not to play games until they're finished, and the Kingdom Hearts anthology or series really is an unfinished 20-year experience, and I just cannot abide the idea that anybody should actually get hyped around Kingdom Hearts 5. And I think the good news is there probably aren't that many people that are hyped around Kingdom Hearts 5, or Kingdom Hearts 4, I guess is what it is. It's not even 5, it's 4. Because I bet even for Kingdom Hearts 3, most of the hype was just mainstream video game journalists hyping it up. I didn't hear any real players actually being that interested in it. Here they have Video Games Chronicle has a collection of screenshots it took from the video. There is weirdness here, certainly, that this kind of red-headed, white-faced character definitely does not look to be Japanese, and yet the street sign here is definitely written in Japanese. You have this red-headed girl that is not doesn't look anything like the girl that I think Sora is normally chasing after. Although maybe that whole part of the story has been wrapped up. Sora, again, he looks like a K-pop idol more than the Sora I'd recognize. It would almost make sense if they were going to try and say that in this universe, the soul of Sora was reincarnated into a more human body instead of a kind of anime moe body. Moving on, the Final Fantasy IX remake looks more likely following the Kingdom Hearts 4 announcement. The game was part of the GeForce Now leak, which has proven accurate so far. Almost certainly Square Enix will try to make remakes of all of its Final Fantasy games, but the problem is most of them suck. So there's not really anything to be excited about a Final Fantasy IX remake coming out. Like Final Fantasy IX remake, I imagine, will just really be a remaster. Although maybe it would be a real remake, because some of these characters seem somewhat recognizable, although not the majority of them. It would almost make more sense, though, to assume they'd make a remake 13 first before remaking 9. There definitely was a better way to remake and reboot the first 6 or 7 Final Fantasies that they didn't do. Yeah, and I am oddly concerned around the idea that they would try to interconnect all the Final Fantasy games. Like, that would be really crazy, certainly. I know a lot of them are already interconnected, so it's really not as big of a concern as it should be, but if they came out with Kingdom Hearts 4 and it somehow tried to connect all of the Final Fantasy universes together into one giant, ridiculous timeline, that would be frustrating. Oddly frustrating to me as somebody who has not played any of the Final Fantasy games. Yeah, maybe I'm just getting old, but I'm literally overwhelmed just thinking about it. I'm literally overwhelmed with Final Fantasy. I have never played a Final Fantasy game except for, like, I think I played 3 for an hour at one time in my youth. Like, and just trying to wrap my brain around Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts stuff, even slightly being related, is exhausting. More news on that factor. The Kingdom Hearts 4 trailer appears to also tease a Star Wars crossover, which, okay. You see a little foot here, maybe, from an AT-AT, or AT-AT. I mean, so, that's believable. Disney owns Star Wars. Disney is going to try and promote Star Wars. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a world you go to that is Star Wars related. That does paint an interesting idea, certainly, as to just how much cartoon Disney will you even see in Kingdom Hearts 4, or is it going to try to be more of a grown-up game for grown-ups? It is somewhat feasible that you could have 1 to 3 Star Wars worlds that you go to in Kingdom Hearts 4, and then you have several Marvel worlds you go to, where you end up fighting with Captain America, which Disney owns all that too, Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff. And then you could throw in maybe Encanto and maybe a few of the Disney movies that have come out in the past 10 years, but you don't particularly have to heavily focus on that. You could potentially also go back to places you've already been, focus on some older ones like Cinderella. That could also be a way to certainly do things, is to try to appeal to older people by showing older Disney movies instead of showing new Disney movies. Because let's face it, as much as I might complain about Ni no Kuni not really hitting the mark for being a kids-friendly JRPG, Kingdom Hearts is nowhere near hitting the mark to be a kids-friendly JRPG. You would be insane to actually hand a Kingdom Hearts game to a kid. They would get very frustrated very quickly. And in more news here, this is pretty much the only big news today, obviously, but I did start early, so I brought this on myself. Kingdom Hearts 4 will be upgraded to Unreal 5 by release and will take visuals several levels higher. I just don't feel like Kingdom Hearts, I don't think like Unreal Engine 5 really can take visuals several levels higher. So it could be several levels higher than Unreal Engine 3 or whatever the original Kingdom Hearts 1 was running on. But several levels higher, going from footage shown now on Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5, I think that is puffery. Like, that's definitely not believable. Right. I really just don't feel like Unreal Engine 5 actually adds even that much. But when you look at the people on the street, that might be that Unreal Engine tech that just randomly generates people, non-playable characters real fast. And the level of detail optimizations in Unreal Engine 5 and lighting optimizations in Unreal Engine 5 might be improved. One of the things I'd like Unreal Engine 5 to do, and all game engines to do, is just have better sound handling, multiple audio streams at the same time by default. It is so often that audio is just not even considered in these upgrades. Let's do this. Destroy this and see if this works for us. I guess we'll try. All he has to do is summon an 1800 character and he can just attack me and win. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says Sonic 2 has the biggest ever opening for a video game movie at 71 million. This really goes to highlight the kinds of video game movies that should happen. Interesting. Did the audio just stutter there? Or was that me? So clearly, of the audio, of the types of movies to make, kid-friendly Sonic movies are the way to go. So when the Mario movie comes out, if it is in that same vein, one expects it will probably do as well. It'd be interesting if it didn't go that well. It might be more pent-up demand for Sonic movies than there are for Mario movies, though. Honestly, I just don't think there's that many. Yeah, I don't know if there's that many other characters you can make a movie around. Might as well special summon this guy. I'm hanging on by the seat of my pants, trying to win here. And our final Video Games Chronicle article for today is Elden Ring's cut enemy dream collecting has been discovered. This cut content would have seen players collecting the dreams of enemies. Which, okay, that might be future DLC, or that might just be some other collectible that they felt the game didn't need. There is something interesting around Elden Ring and the Dark Souls style of games, in that unlike a standard JRPG game, every enemy is kind of a named enemy, a very special enemy. Even if it is just a skeleton at the top of a ladder, you know there's that skeleton at the top of that ladder, and everybody knows what you're talking about. So it's not random encounters, it's not grinding over killing 1,000 skeletons to get up to level 100. In a lot of ways, the Dark Souls style of gameplay like that, or enemy placement like that, probably is the way of the future for all RPG games. And that might very well be for the better. Unfortunately, I think too many people have already taken the wrong message from Dark Souls and tried to make games that are super hard, where bespoke enemy placement and bespoke enemies would be way better. Of course, it probably takes a lot more work to make all those bespoke enemies in a Dark Souls-like game, and throughout all the Dark Souls characters, I don't know if all of them are really that memorable. There's probably a decent number of bosses that have to be mid-tier or even low-tier. Moving on, because I fixed the programming, there are actually very few Gamatsu articles here, just 6. So, for that reason, let's not talk about this yet, and let's instead look at games that have come out on Steam. Now, just as I was wrapping up on Friday, since I've been doing earlier recordings, there were some games that looked like they would have been more adult games that were going to come out this weekend. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. Happy Mining here is kind of an asset flip Minecraft game. Oddly, fairly dark, too. Unless my eyes are tricking me. Just looks like everything is in shadow. Most games are a lot more brighter than that. Yeah, like this definitely is neon and bright. a skateboarding interactive fiction RPG game. I'm kind of leaning to thinking this is probably a point-and-click adventure game. Yep. It's free to play, English only, but it's apparently episodic also. So I don't know what to really do there. It's not being very honest about this being episode 1. I'll leave this on the follow list. It says it's going to be new episodes every week, which that would be an interesting release schedule, certainly, to stick to. As far as the general idea of releasing a new episode every week, like a TV show would release a new episode. That happened kind of oddly to me also with Netflix, in that they released a Korean drama show and I started watching it, and then I was only able to watch 2 episodes, and it said actually you have to come back next week. We're releasing a new episode every week, and I don't want to see Netflix go in that direction. The thing I would like to see Netflix do, however, is I'd kind of love for them to introduce the idea of a primetime data, a list in which you just pick your top 6 or maybe even top 8 shows, and you tell it, show me 1 episode of something like Seinfeld, which is what I'm watching on Netflix right now. Then show me 1 episode of something like Is It Cake? And then show me like 1 episode of something else, to make your own prime time effectively in late night TV. Netflix doesn't really have anything for late night TV so much, like comedians in cars getting coffee maybe. There is also would have to be some idea around like being able to put things in a folder that's just a movie, or just say show me any movie to fall asleep to at the end of this primetime I build, or show me a stand-up comedic act to fall asleep to. But yeah, I think you could catch people's attention, certainly, if you could allow them to recreate that primetime TV schedule experience, because it is a little overwhelming, certainly, and I feel it too when I start like a Seinfeld episode and it just plays into the next episode and the next episode, and then I go back and look, and yeah, I fell asleep or wasn't paying attention, so I saw maybe 1 or 2 episodes, and then it played 3 episodes that I wasn't paying attention to. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Stacklands, which doesn't look terrible, but it is from Sock Pop Collective, so I've already like forbidden any Sock Pop Collective games from being listed, because they always have the same sock achievements. They flood Steam with their games. There's a bundle here for $188. They were putting out 2 or 3 games a week or every couple days. It's just, and all their games are incredibly simplistic and not really good. And even if they are starting to get maybe a little bit better at making their games look good, I just don't want to reward tenacity or poor quality or flooding Steam. Okay, next we have Yummy Girl 2 on Steam, which is tagged sexual content, nudity, mature, and not safe for work. This came out April 8th, so this really wasn't in the weekend, it was late Friday. We're still not seeing a ton of these kinds of adult games, low effort or even high effort adult games being released on Steam. But we're also not seeing a distinctive lack of adult games. When you look at each of these anime cat girl characters, they do tend to look older, so I could certainly see this one not running into as many problems as games that would have more moe, younger looking characters. That's all kinds of languages supported. Yeah. And let's see, as far as the mature content, nudity, sexual content, not suitable for watching at work, not suitable for all ages. All characters in the game are 18 or older. So no deeper description than that. And in a funny way, that's all Valve really needs to do is let one adult game come out every week or two, and they can always hold off the idea of them fully censoring the games that are coming out on their platform. Even if we do know that they're definitely partially censoring based on content the games that are being released, and almost certainly they're not allowing that many games to be released because the numbers do seem to be dwindling. Moving on, we have a game called Dream Vibe, which feels like it's probably a VR visualization software for music. 1274 English only, no VR actually, but early access oddly. So yeah, I don't see anything there that would go to the fall list. Here we have a game called Monster Master. Ni no Kuni used the word master in its dialogue, and yeah, that kind of got me thinking about just how fairly quickly we're going to stop seeing the word master and blacklist used as phrases. We've already seen in the past 5 years a heavy push to get away from using master slave terminology, blacklist, whitelist terminology in favor of server client or allow block terminology. So I imagine Japanese developers in particular will be the slowest, or some of the slowest game developers to get away from using the phrase master, where there definitely will be cases where the Japanese dialogue is literally saying the word master and should be literally localized to the word master, and I'm sure localizers will start to just by default not localize it. Speaking of Japanese creators, the creator of Doraemon died. He was like 74 though, and I imagine that won't stop Doraemon content from being made. It's kind of more likely it's much like Jim Davis, who I don't think has actually drawn a Garfield comic in decades. If Jim Davis died tomorrow, you probably still would get all the same number of Garfield comics as you would expect. And certainly there's enough of them you could just rerun them for eternity. But yeah, it definitely did stand out to me that from the same master. Since Ni no Kuni feels like it should be targeted to kids, saying that the main child protagonist is the master of these familiars is what they're being translated to, but I think they're more accurately being would have been translated to yokai, because they are described specifically as much closer to being yokai than just like demonic familiars. They don't look like a witchcraft or a Satanist familiar would look, and the main character looks like a much closer to a Harry Potter wizard than a demonic or Satanist wizard would look. Let's see. Do we want to pull that out at the moment? I think you do. I guess Pokemon has done a probably great job about not using the phrase master as much as it could have, even though there's a game called Pokemon Masters. I guess there is potentially some people that would say Ash Ketchum is not the master of Pikachu, but I imagine Japanese creators would say absolutely he is. Well, this is gonna wreck me. Oh, we might as well activate the spells. As for what this game actually is, Monster Master, it just looks like it's a kind of low effort zombie shooter. I won't even bother to call it an asset flip. It just does not look polished enough for me. I don't even know if I'd call it a low effort game, really. Particularly when you look at something like Woods of Death 2, which is definitely a low effort game. Yeah, I guess I probably should learn to hold back the phrase low effort until it's really necessary. Like a game like this may be the new mid tier as far as effort. And I should just say the graphics don't look particularly well polished in this case. I do definitely fall into patterns of just saying the same thing over and over again. That's probably because the problems with a lot of games are the same things over and over again. Now here we have a visual novel. It doesn't have any of the tags of sexual content, although it definitely does seem like it's trying to be at least a little bit lewd. And then you have more moe, younger looking anime cat girls in this one. And then definitely, once again, going lewd with cleavage. It's just in the turn, we can't do anything. Nico Mini Sweet Housemates is full Japanese with English and Chinese. But the mature content description says it contains suggestive content, and that's all. So yeah, I don't think there's anything particularly special around this game that would make me put it on the fall list. I think I'm going to have to just be more cruel in general as far as these JRPGs. I mean, these Japanese visual novels, not JRPGs. If anything, I need to be less cruel on JRPGs and play those JRPGs more often because they're more mainstream than thinking about playing visual novels, which are particularly niche. Next, we have a game here called Cyber Stellar, which is a side-scrolling shooter game with an odd kind of voxel, pixely look to it. I would say it probably is 3D pixels, voxels. Yep. But that does not make it look better. In fact, this is kind of the problem with any voxel-based game, is that it almost never looks better as voxels. And it probably never would look better using voxels until the number of voxels you can push to the screen is insurmountably higher. Like, when we can get like 4,000 voxels on screen in the same voxels per inch resolution as you can get 4,000 pixels on screen, then there's potentially hope at that point of voxels replacing pixels. But by the point that you could have 4,000 voxels on screen, you probably will be able to have 20,000 pixels on screen, and so there may just be no catching up. We really do not know the limits to the human eyesight as far as I understand it. So, like, we may be able to eventually just get used to watching things at 1,000 frames per second at a maximum at hundreds upon hundreds of pixels per inch. The thing that's weird about the eyeball and kind of great about the eyeball is that resolution and frame rate changes based on the center of your focus versus the edges of your focus. So the center of your eyeball, we just don't really know how good that could be. And even if we did find out what is the maximum possible capability of the human eye, we probably at that point would be so advanced in our technology that we could increase the possible frame rates and pixel depth of the human eye. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Where Are My Mittens, which just looks like a precision platformer of no real interest. It's free to play, so check it out if you're interested. Here we have a game called Keep It Live, which looks like it's a joke troll game. So obviously I'm going to dismiss that. I may just want to run my macro a second time today. Bang Bang Pew Pew here. Looks like it's a collection of maybe VR games where you shoot guns. Kind of like a light gun on rails shooter type experience. $17.49 English only. Doesn't require VR. Is this polished enough though to make it to my follow list? I just don't think it is. It's 25 tech demos basically, or 25 demos in general. And oddly, it has split screen player versus player. I guess that's not too odd. Yeah, I'd have to say no to that. Let's see, here we have a game called Monster Girls and the Mysterious Adventure 2. And you'd almost assume that this might be based off of some anime show, but I don't think it really is. It's oddly visually polished more than I would have expected. But there is kind of this odd situation here where the Monster Girls themselves are not really standing out. Monster Girls and the Mysterious Adventure 2 aims for better development. So we should look and see what the original game was, how that was received. But yeah. For a game that potentially would have multiple Monster Girls, these screenshots really seem like they're only showing you four or five different types. Slime Fairy, Blue Witch, Purple Witch, Cat, Sith, Tempest. Let's go to the original. No, that's two. So this is one. So the first game came out in January 18th of 2020. Is it in early access still? No. If anything, I think the first game had slightly better interfaces. There is an anime definitely around a person dealing with monster girls, but this is a loosely inspired parody of that, I would say, not a licensed allowed version of it. Yeah, I think I have to say no to Monster Girls and the Mysterious Adventure. Maybe one day they would get good enough to make a good version of that, but it would need a lot of polish and a lot of like development. And if anything, that kind of highlights another issue that is a problem around Japanese RPGs, is that there's far too many people out there that try to use something like RPG Maker to make a RPG game, and they just don't put anywhere near enough effort into it compared to what a good RPG should look like. Standards should have increased significantly, and they just don't seem like, for some creators, they really did. This guy's just not dying. Here we have a game on Steam called Collect Cupcake, which just looks like it's an idle clicker. Doesn't look particularly unique, so we can say no to that. Here we have a Hot Spring Hero, another game that looks like it's probably an RPG Maker game. Looks like it might have an uncensored patch at some point, trying to go lewd, or imply that there's some nudity. This is definitely not the kind of RPG game I'd play, Japanese or otherwise. I want to play 3D RPG games, more than likely. Just because I assume if you're going to spend the effort to make a 3D environment, you're probably not going to waste my time with repetitive tile sets. This is English, Japanese, and Chinese for $17.09. Some scenes in the game will appear bare and sexually suggestive. Content is not suitable for minors. Please decide whether to not play or not. Yep. So they are saying there might be a few bits of nudity. I doubt there's that much, really. Actually, we are now crossing over to the level of seeing enough of these games to think like there must have been somebody that did go for 3 or 4 weeks and didn't approve anything that looked like it had some lewdness or a lot of cleavage, particularly Japanese games, because now we really have gone from 3 weeks of seeing almost nothing, maybe 1 or 2 games, to this weekend seeing 3 or 4 games. This Kung Fu Grand King, again, really trying to hide what the actual game is with lewd imagery. If anything, I wonder if maybe you play the whole game in this little square because this is some kind of port of some really, really old cell phone game or something like that. Let's see. Although this one literally only claims to have strong language, which kind of would have expected more. Next we have the Royal Game of 3D, which there's a couple of versions of this on Steam. This is a recently discovered how to play game. It's not too different from backgammon really as to how it's played, or at least they think they've discovered how to play. So historically relevant, maybe not so relevant to gamers. It's not really the most complicated game since it is very, very old, thousands of years old, from like Egyptian times. So I'll put this on the follow list. It's going to be kind of hard to justify paying $7.99 when you can get like Tabletop Simulator for $9.99 half the time, English and German. But I'll put it on the follow list. I'll consider it. Quite possibly it won't ever have 30 reviews, so I probably would have to make an executive decision to put it in the wish list. I really wouldn't have too much to say about this game either. It's just like, yeah, people discovered it, people kind of know how it's played, they know that there was a bunch of house rules and different evolutions of the rules. You can definitely see that while it is a very old game, it's also a pretty expensive game because you're going to have pips and dice and a board, where a more commoner's game would probably just be played with maybe dice or cheap elements, where this would take a lot of craftsmanship to make and carve. Next we have a game on Steam here called Max Traffic, which doesn't look like much of a game. Minimalistic traffic simulators, how they describe it, which I think that's too minimalistic for me. Here we have a game called Oil Invasion, which just looks like it's probably a low effort Doom clone, looking at the heads up display and all. 59 cents English only. I could potentially just arbitrarily remove everything that was on sale for 59 cents or less than $1 from my wish list, and I probably wouldn't miss out on too many games if that was the case. Like, if I get around to buying any games for the rest of this year during video game sales, I definitely am not going to be leaning towards getting a bunch of cheap games and just increasing the number of games in the backlog, because I'm definitely not burning through games that fast. Let's go through the Gamatsu articles while we're at it. Story of Seasons, Pioneers of Olive Town for PS4 is coming to the West in the summer. Which, okay. That's believable. It's not really that interesting to me, since it's one of these Stardew Valley, Hidden Moon type games that I never find to be quite my playstyle, or quite the kind of game I want to play. It's rather annoying how many people have figured out ways to summon or special summon something on my draw. Right, one ritual spell. Gamatsu says the 3D roguelike top-down shooter series Sam Tormental is now available for PC. It's out of early access after 3 years. Has this literally been in early access for 3 years? I guess that would explain why it was on my follow list. Yeah, that explains it quite a bit. How it stayed on my follow list for 3 years? I don't know. It really shouldn't have. But I could also see myself going through the follow list a few times and just saying, well, this is Serious Sam, so I'll make an exception and leave it. It really, in my mind, kills any enthusiasm, though, for the game that it was in early access for 3 years, and the reviews are so small. Although maybe the reviews reset once it left early access. I'm not even certain. if that's how that goes on Steam. I don't think that is how it goes. So there's just been kind of very little enthusiasm around this game. And yeah, I'd probably only play it to show off a larger group of Serious Sam games, and wouldn't particularly consider it something worth focusing on in its own light. I might play it all the way through, but I probably would spotlight it and just spend an hour on it. Let's see, Melty Blood type Lumnia as a free DLC characters, Powered Seal and Mario Galileo Bestino announced, which I assume this is Mario, and this is Powered Seal. Melty Blood being a collection of Japanese characters, several of which seem to be maid girls. Unless that's the same character as that, which that might be the case. In a fighting game. And it'll still be a long time before I get around to the idea of actually playing fighting games. Okay, I have to do one thing at a time, certainly, and just trying to cover RPGs is going to take so much time. Let's see. What do I want to send to the graveyard? That? Let's see. Next, Komatsu has an article here. Kingdom Hearts Missing Link has been announced for iOS and Android. A closed beta test is planned for 2022. This is the cell phone game that they were showing off earlier, where you're playing as somebody else who seemingly is in a different world and possibly in a different time. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually his story takes place in between a couple of story elements of Kingdom Hearts 4 and Kingdom Hearts 3. Of course, there's so many side stories told throughout the events of Kingdom Hearts 1 through 3. I wouldn't be surprised if it's yet another side story that takes place between 1 or 2 or 2 or 3. Also, frankly, nothing would surprise me as far as Kingdom Hearts is concerned. The most surprising thing they could do is announce this. How do you get this treasure chest? I don't think I've seen a treasure chest, mate. Is it a mimic? Nope, it's just a gold treasure chest, it looks like. Let's see. Komatsu has the same story. Kingdom Hearts 4 announced, now in early development. I guess technically, if they have a demo in Unreal Engine 4, you would call that early development. You wouldn't call that pre-production where they haven't worked on any of the code. So I guess that's right. Bandai Namco has also trademarked Last Recollection in Europe and Japan. This might be a new .hack collection, is the subtitle suggesting. Bandai Namco, not Square Enix, so they don't have anything to do with Kingdom Hearts, but they may very well be trying to release a new .hack collection as a way of getting more money out of the now particularly old Dot Hack series. That's a series that's where they really haven't tried to make a new game in that series for a while, so it would make a lot of sense to do a full-on remake, reboot. The problem with that, though, is I don't know if there's a reason to remake the Dot Hack series, because any interesting idea that came out around Dot Hack has been stolen and put in the Sword Art Online series, and you would just be cannibalizing your profits against the newer Sword Art Online series if you tried to make something Dot Hack. They'd have to do something totally new and totally different. And I don't think the Dot Hack series as RPGs were particularly as good as they wanted them to be anyways. Or they should have been. And then finally, Gematsu has this week's Japanese game releases, which we'll look at what's new. 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim for Switch, which I've heard that's a pretty crazy visual novel, and maybe with the portability of the Switch it might be beneficial to play a visual novel on the Switch, although I question that. If anything, it probably just highlights that the Switch is still becoming a preferred method to play Japanese games, as PlayStation 5s are hard to get and PlayStation is losing fandom, I think, just in general, very slowly in Japan. Battle Spirits Connected Battlers, I have no idea what that would be. Winning Post 9 is a horse racing game. And Skull the Hero Slayer for PS4 and Switch is the Japanese release of that game. It was already available in the West. And then, of course, you've got your standard long list of digital releases. Let's see, we have a game on Steam here called Drifter's Tale, which looks like it's a card game. I don't know if there's enough visual polish here, though. I'd say the cards look unique enough to give it a chance, so I'm going to give it a follow and be generous that way. But it's a free game, it's early access, it's English and French, it's single player only. There's a high chance this game gets abandoned and never leaves early access. But yeah, these different numbers on the edge of the squares potentially could lead to a different style of deck building collectible card game out there. The vast majority of games, CCGs that I play and see, are so far similar to Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh! and Hearthstone. So there's always like an attack, a defense, and usually some kind of effect on the card. If you try some different things, there might be some room for something different. Moving on to Small Dark House Survival, that just looks like it's an asset flip garbage game, so we'll dismiss that. Here we have a game called Protect Ukraine, which this feels a little sleazy. It's just a tower defense game too. I don't even know if this really is the map of Ukraine, and I don't know what that really would even matter because the map is so zoomed out and just used as a carpet. It's not really actually simulating anything. Next we have a game called Lucky Villager, which looks like a kind of poor quality precision platforming. I don't want to get too political, but I will say very briefly, 47 days into an invasion, Ukraine still being around, a lot of people are singing their praises for that, and I mean, good on them certainly, but like, you always have to wonder how long these things can last, and timing certainly in conflicts can make or break a country. Yeah. And if it may be it may be a great point to reevaluate anytime you may have criticized a government for feeling like they were ready to jump towards conflict or war and moving fast towards something. Certainly there have been cases where the US in particular has straight up caused conflict. If anything, there's a decent argument that the US literally or NATO caused the most recent conflict in Ukraine and Russia. On second-hand guilt there. Of course, Russia is a sovereign state and made the final decision there. But if you actually want to make an impact, waiting too long allows a lot of people to die. Anyways, leaving my opinion at that, here we have a game called Perceptio, which looks like it's a VR game. VR puzzle game on a small floating Japanese aesthetic island. And there might be something to this where they're trying to do something like Myst. It doesn't feel like it's particularly that much content. It's free, it's VR, it's single player. I'll put it on the fall list. Of course, the thing here is, once again, I probably will never get a VR headset. Here we have a game called Obsessive Revenge, which looks like it's a walking simulator from the looks of it, although they're calling it an action-adventure collectathon shooter, which I do not trust any of those tags. $374. Yeah, this definitely does not look like any of that. Yeah. Probably will make it to level 50 on the Battle Pass. Here we have a game called The Duck Suckers, which is some kind of LGBTQ+ visual novel according to the tags. If I was to guess, it's probably a low-effort troll visual novel. I don't even know why you'd make something like this. This is not a good highlight of anyone's skill. This looks like garbage. Not making money from it. I'd almost excuse a low-effort game if you were selling it. Mirror Spirits here. Again, looks like a low-effort horror game. We didn't see too many of those today, but at least they're charging. So, at least I know that level of insanity. Here we have a game called Athamor, which, let's see, seems like it's a horror kind of mystery dungeon. That's what it's tagged as. I imagine it's probably either a horror game outright with some enemies that they're not willing to show, or just a horror walking simulator. Like, does seem to have a loot amount that it adds up, but yeah, I just don't think there's actually a game here or enemies here. This is $9.99 English only. It's only slightly risky to ignore this, so I'm going to ignore it. Next we have a game here called Girl Raid, which looks like it's a Chinese 3D model asset flip first person top-down shooter, or third person top-down shooter. I guess you'd just call that a top-down shooter. Nothing here of interest. So nope to that. Next we have Gymlands, which not quite enough polygons for this art style to really work on me. I think if you smooth this out a little bit more, that's one of the things that Ni no Kuni has going for it, certainly, is that it looks like a Legend of Zelda Wind Waker game, and so it has some of that sentimentality to it, or that goodwill with it, because it feels like it could be a PC version of a Zelda game, although it's not quite really the same type of games there. Wind Waker has you going around in a bunch of different places and more running and jumping. Ni no Kuni lets you unlock the ability to jump, but specifically tells you it will be useless if you do it. I didn't believe that, so let me warn other people, believe them. The ability to jump that you can unlock in Ni no Kuni is absolutely useless, from what I can tell. You will never use it. There's probably a teleport spell you will get later, and so if you see something that looks like it would be a treasure chest or a collectible in a place you can't reach, more than likely you're going to get a spell that teleports you to that point, or levitates the treasure chest to you, or levitates you to the treasure chests. On the other hand, you get an ability to run, and I would say take it, even though it doesn't really feel like it sped up my ability to run that much in the overworld. It specifically says it's an ability to run in the overworld. But I would take that. Otherwise, even playing on easy, you're going to end up slowing yourself down significantly, and you'll be probably 7 or 8 hours into the game before you can even unlock the ability to run. So definitely take it. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Ketchup and Mayonnaise, which looks like it is a hand-drawn RPG game, and I almost want to applaud them for doing that. They're trying for different fight mechanics. These little mini games for your attacks might be interesting in some scenarios, but probably are just time wasters in a lot of other scenarios. As another thing with Ni no Kuni and most RPG games, I think, is that it has like a 5-second load every time you go into a fight screen. It has at least a 15 to 20 second outro you have to click through. 3 different screens you have to tap A through after defeating an enemy. There's just a lot of speed bumps to the gameplay, and it doesn't quite work as well. It's not as polished as I'd like it to be. And when you are in the actual fighting, it is slightly timed fight mechanics, so you're not, it feels like you almost are directly controlling the character, but you're not quite at that point. Sometimes your actions will be a little delayed, or your attacks will be countered. And in a lot of cases, the only thing you can do is see an attack coming and defend, and that mostly means taking your eyes off your character to look at the enemy character, or run out of the way, which you don't move fast enough in the fight sequences to usually run out of the way. Anyways, Ketchup and Mayonnaise here is Japanese only, so I didn't even have to consider it. Tournament of Armistice Preliminaries. Looks like it's an attempt at making a fighting game. If this is early access, I think I want to give this a chance. It probably would never be able to be polished enough to make it to the wish list, but what is somebody who wants to make a fighting game supposed to do? Like, you're probably going to have to buy pre-made 3D models. I would assume that's what all of these characters are. You're going to have to start in early access. You're going to have to try and get the fighting mechanics and the net code, if there is any net code. This is single player with online PvP. You're going to have to just work on things probably for years to try and polish and experience out. before you got anywhere close to making a fighting game that's good enough for people to actually be interested in playing. You know, and so it's probably a near impossible genre of games to try and break into. Here we have some pictocross puzzles called Riddle of the Mask, which kind of feels like a one-screen Unity game. $2.99 English, German, and Russian. We're still seeing a lot of games that have Russian as a language, which, man, I'm getting really political today, but apparently Russia defaulted on some of its debts of buying US debts or US bonds or something. So maybe that would hurt the Russian economy in the long run, but probably not so much in the short run. So who knows? It would be kind of hard to suspect that financially Russia would be any more isolated than it already is through banking and transfers and such. So any game that supports the Russian language clearly has some sort of corporation or some sort of entity that is collecting the money for them, some sort of middleman. And then the middleman is trying to figure out a way to launder the money back into Russia or just holding on to it for him. And of course that comes from a very jaded perspective that every game that supports the Russian language is a low-effort Russian garbage game that's just around to money launder, and not all of them are in that case, obviously. Some games just support Russian as a language because a lot of people speak Russian. This holiday Jigsaw Easter 3 game we can always say no to. Yeah, I'm about to lose again. Next we have a game on Steam called Solitaire Jack Frost Winter Adventure 3, which is just a solitaire game, so we can dismiss that really easily. Yeah, like this publisher, 8th Floor. That's probably the kind of information you would like to see, is that you would like to be able to click the About here and get more of a details, and we make great games, and then a Facebook page and a group page. You can see that I've specifically said don't buy or don't pay any attention to 8th Floor because they've flooded Steam with low effort games also. Next we have a game called Cannonball, which just looks like a single screen Unity game. They're calling it a casual shooting game, kind of like an Asteroids game, I think. Yeah, you're supposed to click when it's pointing in the direction and shoot the other circles. Very simplistic game for 79 cents, oddly Chinese only, when it really doesn't have that much dialogue to it. Next we have a game called Push Ops, which looks like it's a top-down twin-stick shooter. It's a roguelite where you have to push other objects onto the enemies because you don't have a gun. So I guess technically you can't call it a top-down twin-stick shooter. It doesn't really sound like an appealing twist by any means, though. It just seems like a gimmick for kind of no reason. Let's see. Next we have a game called Dungeons Fall, which, despite having a very nice thumbnail and trailer, actually looks just like garbage in its gameplay screenshots. English only, $4.99, that's pretty expensive. Next we have a game called The Ice Caves, which we're calling an action roguelike. And again, does not look that interesting. I kind of do like the idea of making a game free to play just to sell the soundtrack and get people to support you by buying the soundtrack. But I almost wonder if sometimes when you see that scenario, it's simply because the people that made the soundtrack are the same people that made the game, and they just are really trying to sell the music on Steam more than sell the game. Although I doubt that many people are buying their music on Steam. Moving on, we have a game here called Tower of Sage, which looks like it's a deck builder game. I'll put this on the fall list, but it would be kind of weird to play this versus all the other better known deck builder games out there. Deck builder, dungeon crawler games like Slay the Spire. Yeah. It would make a lot of sense for me to just buy Slay the Spire, cover it, and then remove any game that was similar to Slay the Spire or Darkest Dungeon on Steam, unless it had on my wish list, remove it from my wish list, unless it had some other big issue or big twist to it. Next we have this game called Ib, which is, they're saying, is a 2D exploration adventure game set in a creepy, mysterious art gallery. What's weird about this is I don't think this supports English, and it seems to oddly have some relevancy when really I would just dismiss it outright from its visuals. $12.99 Japanese only. I still get to dismiss it, certainly, because it doesn't support English, but I would kind of like to figure out what's its deal. Here we have I Love Finding Critters, which is just a hidden object game. We haven't really been seeing a lot of hidden object games lately, and $5.24 is downright cheap for a hidden object game. Here we have a game called Touch Some Grass, which, boy, does this feel ridiculous. $1.19 English only. Couldn't even see a reason why you would make something like that. Here we have a game called John Christian 2. And I guess it would devolve down to how awful does John Christian 1 look? Is it on Steam? John Christian 1 came out July 7th, 2021, about a year ago. Oh, and this is straight up one of these, or at least it's selling itself as one of these games where you receive the armor of God, which in Christianity there is no real armor of God. There was like a metaphorical armor of God, never to have been mentioned in like one chapter, never to have been taken as a serious armor. And Christian fiction writers, which is basically what this is, went crazy around that. Bible man type stuff. Yeah. And nobody cared about the first game, and I don't think anybody's going to care about the second game. There's very few people willing to play a Christian fiction story unless they are already deep into very fundamental Christianity beliefs, and most of those people don't play video games at all and don't even believe in the idea of video games possibly being a good thing. So yeah, this is a game that would John Christian 2 would almost certainly never be relevant if I was to cover it, or most people to cover it, there's a danger of coming off as being insulting or antagonistic to it, even if you bend over backwards not to be that way. People are going to accuse you of being that way. So it's better off to just not even cover or try to criticize a game like this. And you can definitely tell what my criticisms for a game like this would be. I would say it's got some dark screenshot syndrome. I'd say the graphics look awful. I'd probably say the gameplay mechanics are clunky as you control it. I'd complain about there not being enough enemies. I'd complain about the story being bad. It would be kind of interesting, certainly, if there was some very devout game programmers out there that tried to make a really, really good video game around Christianity or Christian fiction, or even Christian religious beliefs directly from the Bible. But it just doesn't happen, and that's why you have cases where it takes a Japanese creator to do anything interesting with pseudo-Christian or Christian fiction in the forms of like the Bayonetta series or the El Shaddai series. And the El Shaddai series, I guess, is more Kabbalah Jewish fiction than even Christian fiction. Even the Bible Man TV shows and such, it's always a fictional story that then talks about a phrase or a lesson from the Bible, instead of just directly presenting what is said to have happened in the Bible. There was an old anime that got made. I don't know if you'd even really call it an anime, but there was an old cartoon in like the 70s or 80s that was animated by a Japanese company where people would go back to Jesus times, like a couple of kids would. But that's about all I can even think of where they actually show the events. There are probably some standalone Passion of the Christ type movies out there. But I don't think there are any like video games like that. In a lot of ways, Passion of the Christ is the first movie even to be made that was kind of accepted by Christianity, and I'm getting probably a little political in this conversation too, since something like the 12 Commandments or the Bible by Ben-Hur. So there were several decades there where nothing quite else worked or was well received. Then of course you have the whole God's Not Dead, like Pure Flix type movies that came, I think, slightly after Passion of the Christ and were very popular. Again, heavily leaning more towards Christian fiction than actual depictions of what's said is in the Bible. Moving on, back to video games, we have Neon Flash 2, which looks like a garbage game. So we'll say nope to that. We have two more games that are new. We have Warlords Age of Shadow Magic Tactical Action RPG, which looks like a cell phone port of a game. So we'll say no to that. And see, we have an interesting case. If I stay on for 4 more minutes, which I almost certainly will, the program I installed on my cell phone to launch Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel will launch it. So I kind of need to test, will that automatically try and log me out of this PC version of the game? Probably shouldn't, just to launch into the main screen before you're even in the main menu. But weirder things certainly have happened. And the chair's getting uncomfortable again, so I don't know if I really want to run the macro again after this. We've already gone about 3 hours, so really isn't that necessary. Here we have a game on Steam called the Smash Cars Tournament, which doesn't look visually polished enough or varied enough in its tracking. Kind of feels almost like an attempt at making a modern dragster game where you have to slow down and speed up to avoid conflicts, which is not how dragster played, but I could see how you could try and make something like that, where you have to control the gears and speed up and slow down to avoid crashing. If anything, though, I think that would just probably highlight that Dragster, being an incredibly old game, just does not have any relevancy, and making a modern Dragster game is a silly idea. Moving on. GameDeveloper.com says Take-Two is selling $2.7 billion worth of its senior notes to raise cash for the Zynga deal. We had seen this before. I still don't really know what a senior note is. I guess maybe this is some kind of stock that they have to buy back, because it says 1 billion of 3,300% of the senior notes are due in 2024, with 600 million more due in 2025 and 600 million more in 2027, and 500 million more due in 2032, which that's quite a big jump. So it kind of feels like what they're calling senior notes sound a lot like loans or bonds that Zynga Take-Two is selling to buy Zynga. I don't know if that's a good investment by any means. And then the other game developer article we have here is Sega has indicated NFTs can be used to realize the super game ambitions, and we had already talked about that, so we don't need to really cover it again. Here we have a game called Recnum Cherry Dreamland, which looks like a Game Boy game, but it's zoomed in, and this is really what I would want to see. I kind of still would like it to be colored into, but I could see this potentially being good. That being said, I am going to have to make a decision here as to give it more time or just leave it on the follow list, move it to the wish list. It is wanting $7. Classic 1930s soundtrack and art style. Is that what you would be calling this, 1930s? I guess. It may be a little bit too much Cuphead for its own good. I'm going to leave this on the follow list and not make a decision one way or the other, which is kind of not helpful, but that is definitely where I'm leaning. Here we have a Young Maiden Otome visual novel. It has 6 reviews so far, but it also only came out in February, so it deserves more time. Here we have Rika's Fragments, which is a VR horror game, if the screenshots want to load. I'm back to having screenshots not load. That might be because one of the plugins is not enabled, or it might be for some other reason. This came out in 2019 though. October 2019. It's mostly positive and it's still in early access. I think at this point I have to say no to this. 3 years of early access and still. And VR. Some of these screenshots do look very good. But I also feel like this is something you really couldn't play single player, even if you did have VR. Because you're seeing that people are having to control things with their cell phones. Also, let's see. First person shooter VR versus crowd game. That's, yeah, asymmetric gameplay. So that can go. I would never be able to get enough people around. Regrowth here is a puzzle game. It probably doesn't have enough polish. Race against time to save the islands from sinking. Use plants and animals. Collect and channel water. Let's see. Seems like he's maybe a YouTuber because he's listed a YouTube video here. I'm gonna give this more time since it's 100% positive, but I imagine I'm gonna say no to it. Otherwise, Regain Earth First Strike. Is this from 2021 and still in early access? Yes. Definitely do hear what kind of feels like fan spin from my ceiling fan now that my ears are all clean. I have definitely, with my computer being half open and on its side, I have noticed some of those fans do make a little bit more noise than I would have suspected in the computer case, but I'm not hearing any high-pitched screeching or clanking, so I think I just don't have the quietest fans that I possibly could have, which is fine. I probably can't afford the quietest fans I could possibly have. I think I can remove this one from the fall list. There's not quite enough visual polish to make me want to play this kind of game, a zombie shooter in military outfits. Here we have a game called Refuge, which, yeah, I feel like I'd probably play something like Nier Automata and then get the same feeling, only better compared to playing this. Again, this feels like some of this could be asset flipped. Yeah, I don't even really know why something like this would have been on the fall list in the first place, other than I probably was just emotionally drained and did want to make a decision, so I put it on the fall list. Which, that is the thing, is whether you're going to a grocery store to shop for groceries or whether you're going to Steam to shop for video games, the more emotionally drained any storefront can get you, the less smart decisions you will make, and you'll start to buy more things than you want. And certainly grocery stores know that, and that's why they make it so you have to go all the way to the back to get the milk and the eggs, even though almost everybody is going to get milk or eggs in every grocery shopping trip. They want you to walk by as many distractions and walk as far as possible. Refactory here is just a Factorio simulator, and I think if I'm going to play something, I probably should just play Factorio. That would make a lot more sense. Or Satisfactory, whichever one. And I probably won't even play Factorio, so that can leave the fall list. Redrawn the Painted Tower Collector's Edition is a hidden object game. I don't know why I would have specifically kept any hidden object games in my fall list. It's $13.99. Doesn't really feel like it's part of a series or anything like that. It's not really trying to sell itself as a sequel or connected to any other hidden object game I may have covered on a long time ago. Even if it was connected to it, some hidden object game I played several years ago, I still wouldn't really care. So that can easily leave. Read out Space Assault is a fly around space game, which, yeah, it's kind of nothing there. So that can go. We Deliver is from May 10th, 2021. This looks like this might be something if it was really cheap. It's 99 cents. It has one review, May 10th. It was a pre-launch reviews. We have several positive reviews here. I don't know if that's quite enough. I think I'll just not make a decision and leave this on the fall list. But as time goes by, I'll probably have to decide to move it from the fall list. It's just not quite enough here. I'm a little surprised we don't see more animation styles like this, or more like South Park animation styles. If somebody just wants to tell a story and make an adventure game around that, you'd think you would have more people that try to just do it in that kind of big head South Park style. We have a game called Red's Runaway. I feel like anything that even looks slightly like Little Red Riding Hood catches my attention too often. This looks like this is just an infinite runner of not quite enough polish to interest me. Yeah, I think that can leave the fall list too. Even the two South Park games, which arguably, if I am going to be playing RPG games, there is an argument around playing the South Park games too. Okay, so it should be past the point where everything resets. I'm not seeing a login bonus though. So it might be a case that you actually actively have to log out and log back in to get the login bonus, or maybe it doesn't quite reset exactly at noon. Might reset actually at like 12:30 or 1. So actually, I suppose this is saying it is going to start late in the evening at 11 p.m. Today, so that's going to be a while, isn't it? Slightly more points needed. It was 2,000 before. We'll be getting synchro reward tickets after we get gems. We also will be getting a mate's base after gems. So slightly better rewards than the last event. Go ahead and collect our items. accessories, icons, mates. I have no idea where the treasure chest comes from. Where that treasure chest mate came from. Alright, so there will be a different bonus pack. And we'll probably wait till the end of the festival to open that. I seriously doubt I'm going to spend any extra energy making a deck for the festival instead of just using the loners. Unless the loner deck gives me less reward, which the last festival that wasn't the case. Let me just scroll down my Twitter feed and then we'll wrap up this stream, and I think that's good. Again, I think my new replacement monitor is working, but it's hard to tell. It could be flickering and I'm just not seeing it. Hogwarts Legacy says your own personal sanctuary awaits you in the room of requirement. Hogwarts Legacy. Hashtag Hogwarts Legacy. Video Games Chronicle says Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga recorded the biggest UK launch for a Lego game ever, which that's believable. Apparently Telltale Games figured out some way to make a custom character to look like the big bad wolf from Telltale Games. Remember, this is the new company that owns the rights to Telltale Games, not the defunct Telltale Games. Alright, now I'm just scrolling down my Twitter feed just to see if there's any other bits of new news. Apparently Capcom has confirmed that a Capcom Fighting Collection will be released in June. Capcom Arcade's second stadium has been announced. Also, we'll look at some of this. Apparently this would be the 132nd birthday to all Commander Shepherds across the multiverse, according to BioWare. I don't know how that works. Yeah, people have forgotten about the Forgotten City, but apparently a month ago it won I don't even know how you'd pronounce it, Pegasi for Best International Game at the Academy des Arts et Technique, some French organization. Yeah, Forgotten City, it would have been a lot nicer, if Forgotten City as a mod and as something that was very nichely popular. It would have been nice if it had broken out big time and become very mainstream and successful. And I imagine it probably is fairly successful, but like every other game that's come out this year, and perhaps like every game that's come out in decades, even though there isn't really a lot sucking the oxygen out of these announcements, people are just getting distracted with non-video game. It does kind of just feel like people are getting distracted and not wanting to stick to games or talk about games. Even I'm getting distracted trying to say that sentence. Video Games Chronicle says the Gearbox owner Embracer Group, which has spent over $8 billion on 62 acquisitions since 2020, has reportedly said it's planning a similar number of purchases over the coming years. So they plan on doubling. Although I think it's also a little unfair to use this image, because while Embracer Group got Gearbox, they did not get Borderlands. EA, or 2K, I believe 2K owns the rights to Borderlands. If anything, Embracer Group got Randy Pitchford and all the problems Randy Pitchford has created in Gearbox, and who knows how many talented people still are at Gearbox, whether you're talking about the Gearbox Montreal office or the original Gearbox Frisco, Texas office, or Dallas, Texas office. Apparently, Might and Magic Clash of Heroes is verified on Steam Deck, which, okay, that's probably a decent game to play on the Steam Deck. It's also a very old game, though. Video Games Chronicle says Battlefield 2042's concurrent player count on Steam fell below 1,000 for the first time on Monday, which that's probably not a good news. Still scrolling down through what's been new since the last 3 hours and 16 minutes. So, this game, Burnhouse Lane, which is, I think, a spiritual successor or continuation of The Cat Lady, is coming out in Q4 2022 now. I already have it on the fall list, making a special exception there. That being said, I don't know if this Burnhouse Lane is even being made by the Cat Lady creator so much. It might be the case that it is from the creator of the Cat Ladies, and that would be Harvester Games, or it could be somebody different at Harvester Games, or it could be that the other games were published by a different publisher. Maybe they're all made by the same person. Of course, that's gonna kill. Yeah, the original publisher was Screen 7, and so now they're just self-publishing. It's gonna kill the idea of the Devil Came Through Here trilogy and turn it into a quadrilogy. I definitely felt like I would have liked Downfall and Lorelei to have more impact on me as much as the Cat Lady did. But I honestly wouldn't be surprised if I played the Cat Lady today and was just not as affected to it. I probably was in a different emotional state when I first played the Cat Lady originally. Yep. Gamatsu has an article here. Capcom Fighting Collection pre-order trailer available to see. I think we had already heard something about this, though, as far as the Fighting Collection, because it was going to have a lot of the Dark Stalkers, not to be confused with Darksiders, games. Like, all of these characters here are Dark Stalkers games. Let's see, we also have Gamatsu article. Capcom Arcade's second stadium announced for PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. They just have that one little screenshot. And then Witch on the Holy Night for PS4 and Switch launches in December in Japan, which looks like it's a visual novel. Yep. Yeah, it does not seem like noon is the right time. The other thing, certainly, is the cell phone game I play the most, Destiny Child, does not particularly benefit from me scheduling the app opening at specific times because I'm constantly launching Destiny Child and playing it to just maintain progress. Um, so I could try and better schedule my day, and that's never worked in the past for me. I've never been able to have much of a strict schedule. I don't think humans are really designed that way. Um, but I might give it a try. But more than likely, I'll still spend a ridiculous amount of time playing Destiny Child or having it run while I'm doing other things. That's really what happens. And again, doesn't look like I had any frame drops or problems. So everything feels like it's working now. If I can just cross my fingers, knock on wood, still be able to say that in a week or two, I may finally build back that confidence to think my computer is pretty much fixed. Of course, it might be a case that I finish playing Ni no Kuni in 60 to 100 hours 3-4 weeks from now, and then I start playing something more visually demanding, and then I start having problems again. That is a possibility too. But at least at that point, I would almost certainly be able to pin it down to the graphics card being the problem. But I really don't want to have to buy a new graphics card. Those are still ridiculously expensive. Anyways, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and give me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.